Z is Kerravala of ZK Research, and I wanted to welcome you to this UC Summit session on meetings in the next normal, whatever that means. This will be a virtual fireside chat where I'll be joined by Gary Sorrentino, Global Deputy CIO of Zoom. Gary, why don't you say hi to everybody?
Hi, everyone. How you doing?
Yeah, and this is it's an interesting topic because, what is the next normal? So we're about 2 years into the pandemic now, and I still hear people talking about when we go back to normal. And the reality is, I don't think there is a normal, and hybrid's going to be the way. In fact, I think businesses need to be mentally prepared for an environment where everybody's in the office, nobody's in the office, and every possible combination in between. In fact, before we get started, Gary, I'll just go through a few data points in my research. Almost every business I've talked to wants some kind of hybrid workforce. And my data shows that 61% of workers will work somewhere between 2 to 3 days a week. And however, the variant continues to create uncertainty. So companies that have planned to go back to the work, of course, pulled that back earlier this year. And like I said, businesses need prepared for that uncertainty. So, that's what you and I are going to talk about. I want to start off with a question to you. Many companies have either started a return to office plan. They planned on a January return to office date, but of course, because of Omicron, that's kind of gone by the wayside. It seems that even with all this planning, it's not going to be enough as the landscape keeps changing. So what do you see there?
So we're working with companies all over the world, and I think they're all struggling with this clear direction forward. I think we're seeing more companies. Look, we're towards the end of January now, and more companies are just delaying their plans for return to office, as you said, due to the new variant. And I think we're going to see less office presence, or at least a delayed office presence. I think adding to that, companies are actually trying to throw a little bit more into the mix. Besides figuring out return to office, some companies are even trying to modify their work weeks. We're hearing stories about 4-day work weeks going forward. And even places like the Middle East, who traditionally didn't have the same Saturday, Sunday weekends, are now looking to move to the Saturday, Sunday weekend. So there's changes going on. I think, but here's the thing. While companies are trying to figure out where the staff will work physically, and that's really what the question is, there's a changing variable. The employee sentiment is changing. With every new thing that we're hearing, the employees are changing. I think we have to realize one fact. The staff that we sent home almost 2 years ago, they're clearly not the same staff that's returning. I like to say they're emerging from these home offices, and I love this word. I think they're more empowered. They've made really clear decisions. I know how I want to work. I know where I want to work, and I know when I want to work, which is different because how I worked, when I worked, and where I worked was dictated before the pandemic. And I'm also willing to do a couple of things. If the company that I'm employed for right now will not provide me with that environment where I feel will align to my success criteria, I'm willing to leave. Now, we've heard this called, the Great Resignation, right? But I really think this is more like a great reset because the workforce is not resigning. Everybody's switching jobs. The talent pool is better than ever. But at the end of the day, if you have to make decisions, there are lots of changes happening at the same time.
Yeah, I find it interesting, too, that we're in an era now where people will start a job, they'll work for a company for a couple of years, and they'll leave, and they'll have actually never met a coworker, right? And that's the first time in history that this has happened. And, clearly, I think there is a lot of talent, to your point of the Great Resignation, available. Employees want to work for companies that make them successful. And so I do think you'll see this churn continue. But as the return to office unfolds in 2022, what recommendations are you making companies should be doing with their respective workforce?
So I think for the first time ever, we're going to have to finally upskill our entire workforce in how to succeed in a hybrid world, because this is new to the employees as well as the companies, right? The future of work, it isn't. Most people think that's limited to where I work, but it's what work looks like and how work is actually getting done. And more importantly, it's changing the way we collaborate. And I think we have to take it in a broad spectrum. Think about us humans. We communicate in many ways, right? We write, we talk, sometimes nonverbal, right? We listen and we read. And we have to continue to find how are we going to get the newer technology to mimic these forms of communication, because one of the things we have to do is we have to replicate what was in the office in a different way, and we have to kind of make it better. And, I don't think it's only through new tools, but it really is. Some companies are actually taking their existing tools and their technology, and they're using them in a different way, right? It's rapidly changing the way that the world is evolving. And how are we going to keep the tool set up to make us collaborative, inclusive, parity, all those great words? As a result, the entire workforce is going to require training on how do we actually use these tools in ways to increase collaboration and keep our teams efficient. And it has to be with no focus on location. Look, for the first time, I think what we're going to have to do is we are going to have to teach our employees how to work, not just their job. A developer needs to know how to develop. If you're in finance, you need to know all the different applications. But now it's about teaching people how to work and how to work together. I think there's one other thing they got to consider. It keeps coming back around, employee safety and well-being. And I think right now we're not leveraging some of these collaboration tools, because you can imagine these collaboration tools collect a lot of data on us.
Yeah.
It tells us, we can interface with environmental sensors. We can read how many noses are actually in that room. And is this room a 6-person room with 8 people in it? When we interview employees started going back to the office, the one thing they say is, we want to be safe and we want well-being. Got that. We don't want to be the enforcers. I don't want to sit there. Imagine this. You walk into a room and your boss walks in and breaks the social distancing policy for that conference room. You're going to stand up and say, hey, I'm sorry, boss, but either you leave or I leave, or you're just going to sit there and let it happen. And the problem is now, if these policies get violated and people get put at risk, they're not going to come back to the physical office. So we really need to how do we take the new work habits, the new work patterns, plus that with employee safety and well-being, and this is how we can advise our employees to work in the future.
Yeah, I want to stay on this point too. We're currently in the midst of this great resignation we talk about, and it's a double-edged sword for companies, right? Like, while no company wants high churn, in fact, I've talked to some companies whose churn rate's historically low single digits, and they're seeing double-digit churn now. They are looking at it as a way of upskilling their talent and attracting new people. But in fact, my research shows that about 2/3 of the U.S. workforce will change jobs in this next year, making what's really an unprecedented amount of talent available. And what's fascinating now is that if you look who's available in the workforce, especially with the younger generation, they're not looking for the biggest payday, right? They want to work for a company that can make them successful, where they can make a difference. And I think the tools that workers use have a direct impact on how successful they are. In fact, you talked about some of the collaboration tools, and I think choosing the right collaboration tool can actually help people be more successful. Choosing the wrong one, though, actually, I think can set the company back and cause them to lose that talent. So, I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, so, looking at a couple of things, right? I think what we need to do is this. We really just need to reimagine the in-office environments, right? With a focus on employees. But I think going back to this whole great resignation, part of it is really about, are we going to be able to retain the talent we want? Because what happens all the time? The talent you want to keep leaves, and the talent that you would love to upskill, right, stays. And so I think that's the dichotomy right now is, how are we going to figure out a way to create an environment where the employees that we greatly cherish and need stay? But the other thing is the potential. I think people have to look at the potential to now hire talent that you need anywhere. This is no longer where you got to live in the New York area or one of the metro areas to get a job at one of the big firms. Now they can reach out to someone who is doing at-home type work. I can do it in just by myself. And with just doing it by myself, does it really matter if I'm 60 miles away or 5 states away? It's just a call at the end of the day. So I think companies today really need to sit back and figure out, and I think the one thing here that we're maybe leaving out is middle management and leadership is going to make this successful, because we've learned to deal with some unconscious bias, and location is going to be another unconscious bias. As this pandemic ends, are we going to give more to the people we see every day sitting outside our glass office, or the people that we never see unless they're on a screen? So that unconscious bias is going to come in also.
Yeah, the management aspect of it's interesting too, because when I talk to organizations about some of the challenges they've had with the remote workforce, you think of a traditional, inside sales bullpen. The manager can manage just by simply wandering around and listening to the calls, right? And that's no longer the
Yep.
case. And so I think a lot of you had talked about the data that's in platforms like Zoom. All that data can help people manage differently. And I think you're right. I think part of the success here of companies is how they take that data and turn it into actionable insights in which they can manage people differently, because this kind of managing by feel that so many leaders have done over time just isn't going to work anymore.
Well, part of that was probably also that we have to retrain the way we talked about upskilling our workers. Don't you think we have to upskill our
Oh, sure.
managers? And we have to teach them how to manage in a way like you said. It's too easy to say, I walk around and I see everybody physically here, therefore they're working.
Yeah.
And we have to change it from I'm here to I'm producing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a different set of metrics to look at too. Now, Zoom, I think, certainly through the pandemic, greatly helped keep employees connected and productive, through the last couple of years. Now the companies are starting to solidify their plans for some version of hybrid work. We don't know what that's going to look like or when it's going to be. How should business leaders be looking at the work environment?
So, coming into this a couple of months ago in 2021, it was amazing about how many companies, I think some of the numbers were like in the 60%, who have made no changes to their office environment. They were just going to open the doors and they were going to accept people and they were going to do what they consider to be hybrid, excuse me, or flexible work. And it's incredible. There was a stat in the middle of 2021, over 90% of the conference rooms were not equipped with video.
Yeah.
Crazy. So I think really the business leaders, you have to reimagine that office now. You have to reimagine it and you got to focus on what is going to bring my employees here. What capabilities can they do here? Can I create this world where they're happy to work here? It's inclusive, regardless of whether people are virtual or in presence, right? And we're still productive. So they're going to everybody's going to embrace some sort of flexible hybrid workplace, whether they like it or not. And hopefully after this next variant, we're going to finalize the return to office plans. But I think companies really need to take a hard look at, are we adopting the right technology? Are we creating collaborative and inclusive work environments? Are we creating that parity? Are we meeting the needs of employees? And it doesn't really matter where they work. Are we setting them up at home for success or anywhere for success? Are we setting them up in the office for success? And I think they really need to do that. Like, for example, think about this. We're on a regular call and, we see the normal Brady Bunch. But now we have 4 or 5 people in a conference room and they're all in one square.
Yeah.
So Zoom came up with something called Zoom Room Smart Gallery. And what we do is we look at all the faces, we divide them up into separate little feeds. And now the remote people get to see everybody. When they talk, they're not a small person in a scene of 4. Everybody can clearly see it. I use this analogy. Whenever there's a conference call going on right now, there's 3 calls going on at the same time. There's the presenter. They're on their own talk track. They're probably not paying attention to the people in the room. They're clearly not paying attention to the people on the screen because the screen now has the presentation. So there's the presenter. The staff in the room, they have a unique tool. We call that whisper. They're whispering to each other.
Yeah.
And the staff at home, they're chatting. Okay, we have to figure out, how do we get the presenter, the whisperers, and the chatters all on the same page, all in the same meeting? And so some companies are doing it by having people bring their laptops into the conference room. Can you imagine going into a conference room and there are 8 laptops, everybody with a headset? That's not a conference. Yeah. So they're picking up their laptops and they're saying, hey, I can do this from that shared desk they gave me, so I'll go out there. About 2 days later, they realize, I'm doing 10 calls from my shared desk. It sure looks like home. Maybe I'll go to that other workplace. So I think what we need to do is companies really do need to figure out, are we bringing technology in that's going to give us, all those big words we talk about, equality, parity, democratization, right? The real goal is, can we continue to make people productive in a flexible hybrid environment using technology and then teaching people how to use it.
Yeah, it's some of the stuff you're talking about is interesting because more and more virtual meetings are actually, you could argue, better than physical meetings. We used to say that video is almost like being there. Well, now with some of the capabilities like transcription features and things, it's actually better to do the meeting virtually. In fact, I find myself, even the few live events I've gone back to, the keynotes are better streamed virtually because I have my computer, I can transcribe, I get a better view of the stage than I would if I'm live. And so it's going to be fascinating to see this blending of physical and virtual. And I think we've hit that tipping point where virtual actually is better. And I have found myself, even in some in-person meetings, Gary, doing what you said. There's no virtual participants, but I still bring my laptop in and I bring up my meeting tool because I want to be able to record and transcribe it. That alone is a lot of value. So I know Zoom has, you probably dropped more features into Zoom last year than you had in the previous history of the company. So can you highlight some of the new innovation and functionalities that Zoom is delivering to transform meetings and collaboration and whatever this new normal is?
Sure. Well, this takes off to what you said. Think about it. The whiteboard. The whiteboard used to be physically in one place, but now it's a digital canvas. And it really is, we can bring other tools in, right? We have easy to use visual that we never had before. We can now make edits and changes and improvements to that whiteboard before, during, and after the meeting, right? And now anybody can create, annotate. Anybody's allowed to share an idea. It wasn't before where the person who was on the audio call probably couldn't even see the whiteboard, had to follow what people are saying visually, right? And probably never ever got a view at that whiteboard until maybe someone took a picture of it, right? And so right now, creating this virtual hub that'll give us not only real-time collaboration, but a new word, asynchronous. Asynchronous collaboration is going to be so important. It's going to really replicate that whole physical experience. Look, come on, you're like me. Remember the days? You do something on a whiteboard. First of all, what's the first thing you write in the top side of the whiteboard? Do not erase, right? Then the second thing is, after you're all done, what's the first thing you do? You take a picture of it with your cell phone.
Yeah. Or you take pictures along the way to be able to,
yes,
to see how it changes.
And here's the thing. If I'm an asynchronous worker, and if I'm an asynchronous worker, I have to get to the physical board to add something. And also, if I actually added something and maybe one of my peers said, that you did that wrong, there was no going back unless they said what you did. Did I take a picture before I started? Did I take a picture after? But today, right, it's allowing us to work asynchronously. Global staff, we knew about asynchronous because we were always used to, there's a different crew that was going to take over what we're working on asynchronously. For the first time, think about it. Staff is working asynchronously in the same region, in the same office, and on the same floor. And we're not used to that. If Gary works with 10 people, he's going to work with us on that whiteboard. It's not going to be, we're going to work on it for 4 hours, but he's working asynchronously, which means he has childcare in the afternoon. He's going to work on it 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. I think everybody has to remember, what's the new employee? Where? How? What's the most important part? When I want to work. And if I want to continue to add value, you have to give me the tools for that. I do think you hit upon a couple of things, though. I think transcription is very important. Especially we even see it in healthcare. Think about it. And even in telehealth today, you only get a few minutes with a doctor on telehealth. Yeah. And you're trying to ask questions and take notes at the same time. And how many pills, how many hours apart? But with transcription, how many times we used to be in a meeting and someone would say something profound. And the first thing someone would say in the room is, hey, I hope someone wrote that down.
Yeah.
Well, turn transcription on now. It's included in all the platforms. It's great for ideation. What's the worst that happens? When the meeting is over, you delete it. Okay? So at least today we're getting that active of what's going on. If I couldn't attend the meeting, I could read through it. Eventually you're going to see products come out like Zoom, and we're going to highlight the important parts of that meeting. So really you get the Cliff Note versions after the meeting. But I think the other thing is, as we're sourcing talent and everywhere, and we're learning to work asynchronously, we're going to need translation. Yeah. We're going to need the ability for just not even the transcription, but to hear the voice. I only speak one language. But at the end of the day, I should be able to present in multiple languages by the use of technology. And people should be able to consume what I'm saying in their base language. And I think it's going to create endless possibilities. I think a couple other things you're going to see is we're coming out with a product called Zoom Chat Huddle. And really what it's going to do is it's going to give us a visual representation of a channel of communication and we're trying to get back that sense of togetherness, where people are, where are they collaborating, how are they chatting. I also think continuous collaboration is going to be very important. We start a very good active conversation in a meeting. That could be an artifact or an asset of that meeting. That could go somewhere, not in the meeting, because what you don't want to lose is don't lose the value of the meeting. Let's put that somewhere so I could access it later on. And also, and I can add to it, but also we need to bring in other things. From inside the meeting, we now need to say, okay, let's get some of those in-meeting chats from some of the other meetings. How do we bring up files? Hey, why can't we bring up a video of that meeting we had when X flew in and they presented? How do we get to those file share systems? And the goal is, how can we collaborate and communicate in any of the modalities we're at without ever leaving the client?
Yeah, the digitization of the whiteboard that you first talked about was interesting too, because it's the last piece of meetings that went to go digital. In fact, the taking a picture and emailing that around, while that was one way of digitizing it, it certainly wasn't very effective because nobody could ever find those afterwards. And Chat Huddle addresses a big part of virtual working that people said really couldn't be replicated, which is the water cooler discussion. Right. And so that does give people a way to do that. And so those are pretty interesting aspects of hybrid work that actually, again, might give you better access to things than you would have in the physical world. So I do want to ask another question here that, we're seeing many companies that are bridging applications in video, right, as part of improving the employee and client experience. Because I don't believe people want to constantly be switching applications. I think they want more functionality in the applications they already have. So what's Zoom doing to help with that transition?
So I think two things come to mind with that. One, Zoom apps. Two, Zoom SDK. And I really think you have to look at it this way. If you're in a Zoom meeting and you have a client servicing application, bring that app into the meeting. I use it, for instance, is when I talk to my banker. They send me something in email. Now I got to bring another application up. I'm reading the PDF. Of course, I'm on page 5. They're on page 1. It's more than share. How do we bring your client servicing and your internal support applications into the meeting so they're part of this, so everybody's viewing it the same way? And I think that's what the Zoom apps is going to try to bring in. Great examples of that are, do you want to talk the person through how to do a digital signature because they're using an application you can't see? You can see their face. You can see the frustration that they can't figure out to do. Or could you bring that application in and we do it together? Okay, but that's one way. Why don't we bring our apps into the meeting? Let's flip it around. What if you have a great app? Why don't you bring video into that app? So now, if you have a great client servicing app, why don't we make it so that you can press a button in your client servicing app, and now you're going to be able to reach out to your client over video using our SDK. And we have two. We actually have one where you can bring the whole Zoom envelope into your application. Or you can say, I just want it to be a video. I want to do some fancy things, right? I might not want to see Brady Bunch. I might just want to see the client and not you. I want to use other features. So we're giving out both of those, and you have to decide what's better for your company. Incorporating your applications into a Zoom meeting through Zoom apps, or incorporating Zoom video into your applications. And every company has to make the decision about which is the better way to go, because we're all looking for the better client experience. I have an example of this. We have a retailer, and here's what they do. When you go to one of those convenience stores and you go to buy something, let's just say it's a watch, and you want to buy a watch of a certain value, the person who's at the counter there will help you. But if you wanted to buy a watch of a higher value, you could then reach out directly to the person from the manufacturer and talk to a person about that watch. It's that whole value experience that the client gets. So now, you buy the $250 watch, the salesperson locally helps you. You want to buy that $10,000 watch? Let's talk directly, maybe talk to the designer, right? By incorporating video, either in the meeting or in the app, what we want to do is we want to raise that personal experience for your clients.
Yeah, I think, more and more too, video is being integrated into everything that we use, and there's a lot of workflows. You mentioned the doctor talking to the patient. If the doctor's got to constantly be flipping between an application, looking at medical records and looking at video, they're probably not going to ever look at the video. They'll just keep it on the person, right? So by having it all in one place, it actually makes that patient interaction and the ability to look at data much easier. So I think if you think of it from a workflow perspective, that makes some sense. And I was talking with Pat Lamort, Zoom's education lead, about this too, that the integration Zoom's done with teacher tools and content and things like that. So they create one educational experience instead of expecting students and teachers to constantly be flipping through applications. So as this transition happens, though, does Zoom become more of an application platform play and less of a product per se? Because if we are indeed embedding video into everything we use, then what's the future of standalone video platforms?
But I think that's important, right? I started out with Zoom just pre-pandemic, and we were a meeting product, right? Now we're a platform solution. And there's a big difference, because my journey during the day, I switch modalities, right? When I'm talking internally, I might not need client servicing apps. When I'm talking externally, I do need client servicing apps. I want to be able to get details about the client and know about it without opening other applications. I want to know about how to use things like Zoom events when we do large company events. We have some clients that are looking at our events tool even as a merger tool. So they're another creative way of using our products. The problem is, you're right, that standalone single product is not the way to go anymore. You really do need to look for a platform of solutions. And I don't say products anymore, because it really is about solutions. And you need to discover and learn what are the business value functionality, and how can I apply them like they were designed, but even better, how can I apply them in new ways that maybe even the designers didn't think about? And I love having the art of the possible conversations with our clients, because I learn and I teach all in the same conversation.
Yeah, I think that's where the work you're doing on the, with the SDKs and the API side and the Zoom apps really is going to come into play, because, Zoom as a company, you guys have a lot of smart people, but you can't possibly think up every use case in every industry vertical, but the community that you're creating around you can. And that's kind of an exciting thing. I think, years from now, maybe we don't even think of Zoom as a product anymore. Like you mentioned, it just becomes this platform that we use to build experiences on. So that's pretty exciting. Anyways, Gary, I'm looking at the clock and we're running up against it here. Just to finish up, is there anything you want to, can you give me a prediction of what we're likely to see in, from a return to work perspective in 2022?
So I had a little different perspective than now because of the new variant. But I think in 2022, we are going to see companies, even companies that have been a little bit against this and publicly against it, we're going to see companies adopt a flexible approach. I think that's just going to be table stakes going forward for most companies. I think what we're going to find is thinking about the employee, thinking about how to educate them to live in this new world, and giving them the tools to work, which is something we really never did. I came out of the Wall Street era, and a lot of times we picked tools and gave it to people, and they had to use it the way we gave it to them. And today it's more about asking our clients, what do they need to be successful, and then meeting that gap. And I think what we're going to see as we leave 2022, a whole new way of working. You know how I'm looking at this? Let's take advantage of this. In technology, we always had a saying, if only the plane could land.
Yeah.
What we could change, right? Okay, the plane is never going to be closer to the ground, okay? And everybody wants change. So now is the time for us to put these things in place and be ahead of what the future is going to be. The future is ours to write. Hopefully companies are going to write it in a positive way. They're not going to see those big numbers that we said about resignations. They're going to retain their good employees. They're going to hire special talent no matter where they are. And the future is always bright.
Yeah, thanks. I came out of financial services as well. And I was at a retail brokerage firm for a while where we attracted brokers from other firms based on the tools we had, right? Brokers want to make money. And if you give them good tools, they will. And so if we take that as a lesson, for people watching this,
Full circle,
the
right? Full
tools you
circle.
give your employees will have the biggest difference in whether they leave or stay, because people want to be successful, and sometimes companies just don't let them be. So, anyways, on that note, Gary, this was a great discussion. Gary Sorrentino, Deputy CIO of Zoom, great to have you, and thanks everybody out there for watching, and enjoy the rest of the conference.